They blew up my great-grandfather's dam at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday, while I was just grabbing coffee. By the time I screeched into the driveway, 100 years of hand-cut limestone lay in smoking ruins. And there stood HOA President Dexter Hawthorne, grinning like he'd won the lottery, brushing dust off his stupid polo shirt. "Free demolition," he smirked. "Your little swamp was killing our property values." What this idiot didn't realize was that swamp had held back floodwater for the entire neighborhood since 1924. He just pulled the plug on a ticking time bomb with spring snowmelt only 6 weeks away. The sharp stink of explosives still hung in the air as Dexter snapped victory selfies, completely oblivious that he'd turned his $800,000 McMansion into future lakefront property, Old Testament style. My name is Ezra Blackwood, and I'm a hydraulic engineer who thought inheriting 12 acres in Colorado would be the fresh start I needed after my divorce went nuclear. What I got instead was a front row seat to small-town corruption that would make a Chicago alderman blush. The property sits upstream from Millbrook Estates, one of those cookie-cutter developments where every McMansion looks like it was squeezed from the same beige tube. My great-grandfather, Samuel Blackwood, built our stone dam back in 1924 during the Depression, when men knew how to work with their hands and didn't need environmental impact studies to move a rock. That dam created a 3-acre pond that's been the heart of our land for a century. Morning mist rises off the water like ghosts, and you can hear the gentle tumble of water over hand-cut limestone worn smooth as river stones. The smell of wet earth and cattails hits you at dawn, pure Rocky Mountain peace mixed with the metallic taste of thin mountain air. I'd moved back to start a sustainable aquaculture business, raising trout and growing organic vegetables using the pond's natural irrigation. Simple plan: heal from my marriage disaster while honoring my grandfather's legacy and maybe making enough money to forget my ex-wife ever existed. Funny thing about fresh starts, they have a way of attracting fresh disasters. Enter Dexter Hawthorne. Picture a guy who drives a BMW X7, but calls it a Beamer like he's still trying to impress high school girls. 52 years old, real estate developer, HOA president for 8 consecutive years. The kind of man who wears pressed khakis to neighborhood barbecues and thinks rustic charm translates to property value cancer. Dexter had big plans for Millbrook Estates, transforming our quiet valley into some upscale resort community with golf courses and spa facilities. My hillbilly fish pond, as he so eloquently put it, didn't fit his vision of manicured perfection, where every blade of grass knew its place and stayed there. The attack came via certified letter on a Thursday morning, thick as a phone book and twice as threatening. Notice of unpaid assessments and immediate compliance demand. According to Dexter's legal dream team, I owed $12,000 in back HOA fees for community water management services I'd never requested, never received, never agreed to pay for. Oh, and my dam? That was an unauthorized structure violating community standards. Remove it within 30 days or face $500 daily fines. $12,000 in fabricated fees plus $500 a day until I destroyed my family's century-old engineering for a dam that had been protecting their neighborhood since Warren G. Harding was president. I called Dexter directly, thinking we could handle this like reasonable adults. "Listen," I said, "my family never joined your HOA. This property predates your community by 70 years. His laugh sounded like a garbage disposal grinding beer bottles. "Doesn't matter, Ezra. Water flows through our community, so you're using community resources. Pay what you owe or tear down that eyesore." The morning coffee in my mouth turned bitter as his real motivation crystallized. "Your little swamp is dragging down everyone's property values," he continued. "We've got standards here. Maybe you should consider selling to someone who understands what civilization looks like." The crunch of gravel under his BMW's tires as he drove away told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't about fees, regulations, or community standards. This was about power, and Dexter wanted my land for his development schemes. I hired a lawyer that afternoon and discovered something beautiful. My grandfather had specifically refused HOA membership when it formed in 1954, and the original property boundaries were legally ambiguous. County records showed conflicting surveys. We had a solid case. But Dexter wasn't interested in playing by legal rules. Within a week, county inspectors started appearing like biblical locusts, citing anonymous complaints about everything from fence heights to mailbox colors to the alleged sound of my morning coffee grinder disturbing the peace. Safety inspections designed to harass me into submission and bankruptcy through legal fees. He just made one critical miscalculation. You don't pick a bureaucratic fight with someone who designs water systems for a living, especially when you live downstream from his dam. Dexter's first real power play came 3 weeks later, when his golf buddy from the county showed up at my door with a clipboard and an attitude. "Rick Morrison, county building inspector," he announced, not bothering to make eye contact. "God reports your dam structurally unsound. Need to do an emergency assessment." I watched this clown spend 20 minutes poking at century-old stonework with a screwdriver like he was checking a used car's rust spots. The metallic ping of his tool against limestone echoed across the water while he scribbled notes, never measuring anything, never photographing the foundation, just occasionally grunting disapprovingly for show. His assessment arrived by courier the next morning. Immediate demolition required due to catastrophic structural failure risk. Here's where things got interesting. The report claimed my dam showed severe foundation erosion typical of 1960s concrete construction. I nearly choked on my coffee reading that line. My great-grandfather had built this beauty with hand-cut limestone blocks in 1924, 24 years before concrete was even used for residential dams in Colorado. Morrison had never actually examined my dam. He'd filed a completely fabricated report without setting foot on the actual structure. Time for some engineering education. I hired Matthews and Associates, the structural firm that had certified half the bridges in Colorado, for an independent assessment. It cost me $3,000 I didn't have, but their 40-page report was worth every penny. The lead engineer spent 6 hours crawling over every stone, measuring water flow, testing mortar joints with equipment that cost more than my truck. "Dam exceeds current safety standards by 200%. Their summary read, "Original 1924 construction superior to modern requirements. Estimated lifespan 500+ years with normal maintenance." 500 years. My great-grandfather had built something that would outlast the Roman Empire. Now, I remembered reading somewhere that when officials falsify emergency reports, they become personally liable for any damages their lies cause. Morrison had just painted a giant legal target on his back, and I had the ammunition to hit it. I filed a formal complaint with the State Engineering Board, complete with photographic evidence showing Morrison's inspection never touched the actual foundation. Then I sent copies to the county prosecutor, the local newspaper, and Morrison's own supervisor. While I was building my legal case, Dexter launched his media campaign. "Dangerous dam threatens community safety," screamed the Millbrook Herald's front page. Anonymous neighbors expressed grave concerns about the aging structure that could collapse at any moment and flood dozens of homes. Pure fiction, but effective fiction. Dexter organized a concerned citizens petition drive, going door to door with professionally printed flyers showing stock photos of actual dam failures from other states. 57 neighbors signed his petition demanding immediate removal of my hazardous structure. I invited every petition signer to tour my property and see the actual dam, not Dexter's scare tactic photos. 23 showed up on a Saturday morning, and I walked them through the engineering basics using terms they could understand. "See how the water flows over the spillway," I explained, running my hand along the smooth limestone. "That controlled release prevents flooding. Remove this dam, and all that water hits your neighborhood at once during spring runoff." By noon, 18 of those 23 neighbors had crossed their names off Dexter's petition. But Dexter wasn't done playing dirty. County demolition trucks appeared in my driveway Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. despite my pending legal appeals. Orange-vested workers started unloading equipment, while the crew chief waved Morrison's bogus emergency order like a magic wand. I blocked the access road with my pickup truck and called every lawyer, reporter, and county official in my phone. Local TV news crews showed up when police got called to the property dispute involving corruption allegations. Channel 9's cameras caught every word as Dexter tried to explain why a dangerous dam had been standing safely for 99 years, but suddenly needed emergency demolition the day after my lawyer filed corruption charges against his inspector buddy. The news coverage had barely died down when Dexter pulled out his next trick, buying politicians. City Councilman Bradley Walsh suddenly developed passionate concerns about pre-1950 water retention structures and their environmental impact on modern communities. Walsh introduced Emergency Ordinance 847 at Thursday's City Council meeting, claiming stagnant water from aging dams was breeding mosquitoes and threatening public health. The ordinance specifically targeted water structures built before 1950, which meant exactly one thing in our county: my dam. During the public comment period, I stood up and asked one beautifully simple question. "Councilman Walsh, can you name any other pre-1950 water retention structures in our jurisdiction that this ordinance would affect?" Dead silence. That's when I dropped the bomb I'd been preparing for 2 weeks. I'd spent my evenings digging through public records, like a forensic accountant on a cocaine bender. Property deeds, development permits, corporate filings, following the money trail that led straight back to our HOA president's secret empire. "Council members," I said, pulling out a folder thick enough to choke a draft horse, "I'd like to present evidence that the primary beneficiary of this ordinance owns 47% of the upstream parcels through various LLCs and has filed preliminary development plans for a $12 million resort community." The council postponed their vote, pending further environmental review, which was political speak for, "Holy crap, we almost got caught helping with obvious corruption." But Dexter was nothing if not persistent. The next week brought a parade of bought and paid for experts claiming my stagnant pond was an ecological disaster waiting to happen. I countered by inviting the state environmental agency to conduct their own assessment. Their biologists spent 3 days cataloging the wildlife my pond supported: 24 fish species, countless aquatic insects, nesting waterfowl, and a family of beavers who'd moved in upstream. "This is one of the healthiest freshwater ecosystems we've surveyed in the region," their report concluded. "Removing this structure would constitute significant environmental damage." Suddenly, Dexter's environmental angle collapsed faster than his fake concern for community welfare. The harassment campaign intensified. Private investigators started following me to the grocery store. My mailbox got, accidentally, destroyed by the snowplow 3 times in 2 weeks. Someone kept reporting my truck as abandoned whenever I parked in town for longer than an hour. But Dexter had made one critical mistake. He'd underestimated how much his own neighbors were starting to hate him. The HOA's next monthly meeting turned into an open revolt when homeowners started asking uncomfortable questions about where their dues had been going. Turns out when you piss off engineers and accountants, they start auditing your books with the thoroughness of IRS agents. 3 years of financial irregularities came tumbling out like dirty laundry from a broken washing machine. Dexter fled before the vote of no confidence, but not before someone recorded him screaming that ungrateful neighbors didn't deserve his leadership. 2 days after fleeing his own board meeting, Dexter filed papers claiming eminent domain authority to seize my damn property for public safety. I was grilling burgers on my back deck when my lawyer called with the bad news. They'd scheduled an emergency city council vote for the next morning. But while Dexter was busy forging documents and bribing officials, I'd been doing some forensic accounting. 3 years of HOA financial records revealed he'd been embezzling community funds to finance his development scheme. Nearly $180,000 funneled through inflated contracts, shell companies, and fake invoices. I called an emergency HOA meeting for Sunday evening, the night before Dexter's secret city council vote. 150 angry homeowners packed the community center. I stood at the front of that packed room and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I have 3 years of financial records showing exactly where your HOA dues have been going." Gasps turned to angry murmurs as the crowd discovered payment after payment to Dexter-connected companies. By the time I finished presenting 18 months of systematic theft, the crowd was ready for blood. The vote to remove Dexter from all HOA positions, freeze all financial accounts, and file criminal charges for embezzlement was unanimous. Monday morning's city council meeting turned into a three-ring circus when Dexter arrived with his lawyer, still demanding the eminent domain seizure proceed. I handed the city clerk a copy of Sunday night's HOA resolution along with financial evidence showing $180,000 in documented theft. The council voted 7-0 to table Dexter's petition pending resolution of criminal matters. But the sweet taste of victory turned bitter when Dexter decided to take his revenge directly. If he couldn't steal my land legally, he'd destroy it illegally and deal with the consequences later. County demolition crews appeared at my gate Thursday morning with orders to begin emergency demolition based on Morrison's original fake safety report. The crew chief waved that fraudulent assessment like it was still valid, even though the state engineering board had formally revoked it 3 days earlier. Standing there watching demolition equipment position itself to destroy my family's legacy, I did something desperate. I called my grandfather's old lawyer, Harold Brighton. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Harold's dusty law office as he pulled a manila folder from a file cabinet that probably predated television. "Your great-grandfather was smarter than anyone realized," Harold said. "Look at this." The document was dated 1953, a legal agreement between Samuel Blackwood and the newly formed Millbrook County Water District. My family didn't just build a dam for their own property. They entered into a perpetual flood control contract with the county. I was legally responsible for maintaining downstream flow management and had the authority to protect that infrastructure from interference. If anyone forced me to breach this contract and flooding occurred, they were liable for every penny of damage plus federal penalties for interfering with authorized flood control infrastructure. Harold's emergency injunction bought me 48 hours, but I knew Dexter would find a way around it. I called Dr. Sarah Martinez at Colorado State's Hydrogeology Department. 3 hours later, I was driving to Fort Collins with survey data, historical flow measurements, and current weather projections. Her graduate students built computer simulations showing that without my dam, spring snowmelt would turn Millbrook Estates into a temporary lake covering 47 houses for 3 to 4 weeks. I created the Millbrook Safety Coalition and went door to door with flood maps showing exactly which addresses would be underwater. Most people ignore disaster warnings until you show them their specific house colored bright blue under 6 feet of water. Meanwhile, the weather wasn't cooperating with anyone's timeline. Colorado's snowpack had reached 160% of normal levels, and meteorologists were predicting the earliest spring melt on record due to an unexpected warming trend. Dr. Martinez called to update me. Peak snowmelt could start 2 weeks earlier than predicted. If that dam got destroyed, flooding could begin within days instead of weeks. I called an emergency meeting of the Millbrook Safety Coalition and presented our final evacuation plan. "Ladies and gentlemen, I said to the packed community center. Dexter is going to destroy my dam whether it's legal or not. We can't stop him, but we can protect ourselves. I distributed evacuation routes, temporary housing arrangements, and insurance documentation guides for every family in the flood zone. Sunday night, motion sensors triggered alerts showing figures moving around my dam in the darkness. Trail camera footage revealed Dexter's brother-in-law and 2 other men attempting to weaken the dam's foundation with sledgehammers. Deputies arrived and arrested all 3 for criminal trespassing and vandalism, but the damage was done. They'd weakened critical support points just enough to ensure the dam would fail during peak snowmelt. Monday morning's court hearing became irrelevant when my structural engineer confirmed that weekend sabotage had created genuine safety concerns. The federal judge ruled that emergency demolition would proceed under federal supervision to prevent catastrophic failure that could kill people downstream. The federally supervised demolition began at 6 a.m. Tuesday under gray skies. Controlled explosions echoed across the valley like thunder announcing the apocalypse. But Mother Nature decided not to wait for the official schedule. The first wave of snowmelt hit at 2 p.m., 6 hours earlier than the most aggressive predictions. My great-grandfather's pond drained in minutes, as 99 years of stored mountain water remembered what gravity meant. By 4 p.m., water was pooling in the lowest parts of Millbrook Estates. By 5 p.m., it was flowing down streets that had been designed without considering where water naturally wanted to go. My phone exploded with text alerts from flood sensors I'd installed throughout the neighborhood. Basement flooding detected at 47 Maple Drive. Water level rising at 23 Oak Street. Dexter's $800,000 McMansion, built directly in the creek's original overflow channel, was the first to experience what my great-grandfather had understood a century earlier: water always finds its way home. At 6 p.m., the Millbrook Community Center became an impromptu evacuation shelter and the venue for the most dramatic town hall meeting in Colorado history. 300 residents packed into a space designed for half that number. Local news crews documented what would become a textbook case study in how to destroy a community through stupidity and greed. I took the podium, while rescue boats provided a soundtrack of disaster response. Friends and neighbors, I began. 6 months ago, your HOA president claimed my family's dam was a safety hazard that needed immediate removal. Tonight, 47 of your homes are flooding because that dam is no longer there to protect you. Sheriff Maria Santos approached the podium with an arrest warrant signed by the federal judge overseeing our case. Mr. Dexter Hawthorne, you're under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, environmental crimes, and criminal negligence resulting in property damage. Dexter tried to slip out the emergency exit, but 300 angry homeowners make an effective citizen's arrest when properly motivated. Federal prosecutor Janet Walsh arrived with criminal charges that read like a corruption enthusiast's greatest hits: embezzlement, fraud, bribery, environmental crimes, criminal negligence, and violation of federal flood control laws. State Attorney General Rebecca Martinez followed with civil charges that would make Dexter personally liable for every dollar of flood damage, an amount insurance investigators were already estimating at over $8 million. 6 months later, Millbrook Estates looked like a completely different place. The flood damage totaled $8.2 million across 47 homes, every penny of which came out of Dexter's personal assets, various insurance policies, and a federal disaster relief fund. Dexter himself was serving time in a minimum security facility in Kansas, 18 months for embezzlement plus 5 years for criminal negligence resulting in property damage. His sentence included $1.2 million in restitution payments and a lifetime ban from serving on any HOA board in America. The new dam was a thing of beauty, engineered to modern Army Corps standards, but built with limestone quarried from the same Colorado mountains my great-grandfather had used. Federal flood control grants covered the $2.4 million construction cost, turning my family's legacy into a federally protected historic landmark that would control flooding for the next 5 centuries. My sustainable farming business was thriving with community support that felt like redemption. The reformed Millbrook Estates HOA, now led by Janet Morrison with transparency requirements that would make the Securities and Exchange Commission proud, voted unanimously to establish the Blackwood Flood Safety Scholarship for engineering students studying watershed management. As I sat on my front porch every morning, listening to water flow over limestone that would outlast everyone who tried to destroy it, I remembered something my great-grandfather had written in his 1924 construction notes. Build for the floods you haven't seen yet, because water doesn't care about your schedule, your budget, or your politics. It only cares about gravity. Some wisdom transcends generations, especially when it's carved in stone and tested by time.